The book of Job has been quite the journey, with Elihu having plenty to say to Job. And he goes on in, I believe, his grandiosity and says, God is mighty, which is very Islamic, isn't it? God is mighty. But he does not despise anyone. Well, he does, because he loved Esau and he loved Jacob and despised Esau, didn't he? So he does. So he's started off with the look at me and ended up falling flat on his face in the next verse. And I'll just show you what I mean. We'll go to the Bible Hub. Come on, that should have come up. Bible Hub. We'll just put in. Yeah, I'll just show you. Just take a minute. Just bear with me. Hate it. Come on. Old Testament. Malachi 1:3. But Esau I have hated, and I've turned his hill country into a wasteland and left his inheritance to the desert jackals. God hated Esau. He rejected his brother Esau. He hated him. He despised him. So I just wanted to show you that Elihu, for all his grandiosity, fell flat on his face in his next half of the sentence. He is mighty in both power and understanding. Yes. He does not let the wicked live. He's fallen over again, because if we go to Ecclesiastes 3:16, furthermore I saw under the sun that in the place of judgment there is wickedness, and in the place of righteousness there is righteousness and wickedness live each other out the same way. And a lot of this karma stuff, you have to be very careful with that. But gives justice to the afflicted. So does the afflicted here mean the righteous? What does he mean by that? See, there's a very narcissistic sense of religious narcissism here, because he does not let the wicked live. Well, he does, but gives justice to the afflicted. And that is a victim mentality. That's a victim mentality, because you don't normally see the paradox of wickedness go to afflicted. It usually goes to righteousness. He does not let the wicked live, but gives justice to the afflicted. Now, the afflicted could be wicked. The afflicted people could be wicked, and he hasn't mentioned the word righteousness, which is really interesting. It's unusual to compare wickedness with affliction, because affliction is and can be related to wickedness. So he gives justice to the wicked and the righteous. Like the wicked can be afflicted, right? He never takes his eyes off the innocent, but he sets them on thrones with kings and exalts them forever. And that is the message of the gospel. That's Christ crucified and our faith in him. If they are bound in chains and caught up in a web of trouble, that's addictions and life's troubles, and what life can do to us. Could be a relationship with somebody that's turned out to be sour. He shows them the reason. Now he gives you opportunity to see where it's all going wrong. He shows them their sins of pride. Pride will blind you from the answer. Pride will blind you from the answer, because pride leads to destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. He gets their attention and commands what? That they turn away from evil. He commands that they turn away from evil, which is what he wants. If they listen and obey, which is, if anybody hears my words and does them, Matthew 7, they will be blessed with prosperity throughout their lives. That's not black and white. There are some grey areas there. Because just because you listen and obey, you can also run into trials and tribulations as well. And that may not be so prosperous. All their years will be pleasant. Again, not necessarily so. You have to see here the religious, I forgot this word this morning as well, religious fanaticism in these words. But if they refuse to listen to him, they will cross over the river of death. That's stubbornness. That is stubbornness to the point of, and stubbornness does get deep into the soul of people. And they become ignorant. They actually hear, but they can't obey. I've seen this in relationships, and I used to call it, and still do, you might want to write this down, I made it up myself, opposite directional dysfunction disorder. They hear what you say, but they go in the opposite direction. Like if something needs to be resolved, they'll just let it sit, which is the same as going in the opposite direction. And by the time the dysfunction disorder, they come to terms with what's actually going on, it's usually too late, and they've dissolved the relationship. Which means stubbornness does have a journey across the river of death. It does diminish things that are good. For instance, again, my last one, we did a 9-month session of waiting for resolve, which was the journey across the river of death, because whatever the idea of resolve was at the end, it wasn't going to work, wasn't fair. I think it was actually a reverse discard scenario. And while she refused to listen for 9 months, the relationship was over in 5 minutes. And that's the difference. See, stubbornness will go on for years, decades. But a breakup can happen in 5 minutes. It's crazy, isn't it? And because they're dying from a lack of understanding, they don't want to understand that particular instance or the diverse instances that they need to deal with. They refuse to listen to the Holy Spirit or to the person that they're needing to resolve the issue with. And this isn't uncommon. This is happening in so many different areas in life now that people are losing their relationships left, right and centre through this reprobate carnal nature form of stubbornness, which Galatians calls witchcraft, where they just refuse to come to their senses. And a lot of people lose out because of this, and a lot of narcissism is evident in this. And it just brings death. It brings death to everything that's going on. And it's unfortunate because it is very narcissistic when you look at the stubbornness leading to the demise of the relationship, the demise of life. It takes the life out of things. Did you know stubbornness takes the life out of everything? And it can cause injury, mind injury, because hope deferred. See, it's a deferral of hope. God's trying to bring hope. They're refusing to listen. It's being deferred, and it makes the heart sick over and across the river of death. The lack of understanding can also defer hope and make people very sick. So stubbornness isn't healthy, and I guess there is a place where you have to have a standoff and give people time to try and adjust and adapt to what's going on in a situation. Like it might be, again, it could be a disgruntled family member, and it might take time to turn them around. But you've only got a certain amount of time when you get to my age, 57, that you can waste on people that have got character flaws and issues going on that absolutely have nothing to do with you. And once they've worn you out, again, you can have a mind injury from that. He goes on to say, for the godless are full of resentment. And let me just say, that's a little bit black and white, because godly people do fail to deal with resentment as well. And this is very dangerous, because resentment will always lead to sabotage. Especially in a intimate relationship. If there's no resolve and things turn to resentment, goes covert and then overt, the resentment usually manifests in argumentativeness, up to abuse, to bitterness and mixed with the resentment, which will go an emotional affair. They'll start to sue with somebody outside the relationship to probably a full-blown affair, because resentment's got a way. Resentment's the beginning of the end. That's the simplest way you can put resentment. If it's not dealt with, which it's not here because the person's full, that's usually the beginning of end of something important. Yeah, resentment's an absolute destroyer. And particularly if you meet someone and they haven't dealt with their resentment relative to the issues that they may have been faced with in their last relationship, that's really going to bring down the track some serious problems. Even when he punishes them, they refuse to cry out to him for help. That's the depth of this stubbornness. And a lot of you listening do have a Christian pedigree, and you've decided that that's not for you for one reason or another. That's actually you punishing yourself. God's help is there. It always was and it always will be. And if you choose not to take that help, then at the end of the day, that's on you. Again, his religious fanaticism continues as he says, they die when they are young. This goes for godly and ungodly. But in the case of drugs and chemicals and things that people take now, alcohol, nicotine, this is going to bring an accelerated journey to death, because it's destroying the structure. It's destroying the temple. You're burning the temple down. You're ruining it. And that can bring a premature death. For the righteous who die young, it's a different way of death, as it were, but both righteous and the wicked die young, depending on what calamity happens or what crisis, trauma or event. And they die young after wasting their lives in immoral living, and that's what I was trying to say. Immoral living will rush you towards your death. By means of their suffering, he rescues those who suffer. Now that's funny, isn't it? Because it's like a victim mentality. It seems to me underneath that Elihu has some kind of victim mentality where then this is really not a good thing for those people that do have a victim mentality, because this would be justifying it, rescuing people that are suffering. And yes, of course, that's the human approach, but he doesn't just rescue people that are suffering. Again, it's a black and white statement, and it has a point, but it depends on the suffering, doesn't it? He rescues those who suffer. Well, what are they suffering from? Might be part of the bigger picture of that, and he gets their attention through their adversity. I know for a fact that people that go into very confronting adversity do, in some cases, turn to God. There are other people that just die in the dark. But adversity, as I say, pain and loss always has a way of bringing people closer to God. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this teaching tonight. I'm Reverend Dr. J.W. Morrison, theologist, Gosford, Central Coast, New South Wales, Australia. Thank you for joining me, and bye for now.